But now I hope you're beginning to see organisms as the phenotypic sum of the expression of their genotype and their lifetime interaction with their environment. Phenotype equals the expression of the genotype in other words, the complete set of alleles that an individual's got and its interaction, the genotype's interaction with the environment. Environment. When you think of a population, now I hope you're beginning to realize that it is a population of alleles, a gene pool. Some of the alleles in that population will be very old, some relatively new. Some will be on the ascendancy, increasing in frequency. Others will be on the way out. The bigger the population, the bigger the gene pool. Genetic diversity, the number of different alleles of genes in the population, is important. Small populations have small gene pools, so less alleles of each gene. A population with low genetic diversity has less capacity for change in the event of a change in the environment. If there are fewer alleles of each gene, there is a lower likelihood that amongst them is an allele which confers fitness to the changed environment. This is what we mean when we talk about critically endangered species, populations that have fallen so low that they are unlikely to be able to adapt to a changing environment, leading to their extinction. It applies to larger populations too that have become fragmented because of things like habitat loss. Okay, there might be quite a few tigers left. There aren't that many, but the number of tigers left is increasing. But we're still worried about them because the populations are fragmented. This population over here has no ability to breed with this population here. We say that there is no gene flow between them. A new allele that's beneficial that appears in this population can't spread into this population. So the genetic diversity remains low. Large populations can also have a low genetic diversity, even if they're not disconnected. A population whose breeding is very tightly controlled, like chickens or wheat, where a particular set of phenotypes is desired over all others, shows very low genetic diversity. Other populations that are large but have grown rapidly from a smaller population, perhaps following a decline in numbers, like a bottleneck. If we have, we just sort of look at over time, this is time here, and here are our individuals. As we pass through time, something happens that means that we've got less and less and less and less individuals, and this we call a bottleneck because it looks like a bottle. Okay? If they don't go extinct, but they come out the other side, then everyone that's descended from that point forward is from that point forward is descended from these guys at the end and the alleles that they had. There may have been all sorts of other alleles in the population before, but they didn't get passed through the bottleneck. Only a few alleles get passed through the bottleneck, and then those alleles are the ones that the descendants carry into the future. Okay, this has famously happened with cheetahs. Cheetahs, although there's low numbers now, there's more than there used to be, and cheetahs show incredibly low genetic diversity. You also get a similar sort of thing happening where you might have had one initial population and then a small number of them get separated off. Okay, pressing a button somewhere. All right. If that population then goes and lives somewhere else, and then over time that population grows in number, well, then everyone in that population is going to be descended from that initial, what we call founder population. You know, like the founding fathers in America. All right, a founder population. They're reproductively isolated from this lot. Okay, there's no gene flow between them. Okay, and then these lot give rise to all of these. We find this in humans. All humans outside of Africa, and we can maybe talk about that another time, why outside of Africa, but all humans outside of Africa show incredibly low genetic diversity because they're all descended from a few groups of humans that went out of Africa, and then it spread very quickly, grew very quickly in numbers across the rest of the world. You know, if the population's grown gradually over many generations, then there's time for new alleles to appear. But if it's grown quickly because, you know, there was less mortality, then there's less time for new alleles to appear, which is exactly what's happened with us. Now, what I want to talk about is something else that can happen when you separate a population. Okay, if you've got an initial population, these dots are organisms, if you hadn't kind of figured that out, then for whatever reason, some of them get separated from the rest. Okay, so these guys here get separated from these guys here. Then, as long as there's no gene flow between them, we describe them as being reproductively isolated. Now, this happens surprisingly frequently. It's going on right now with the parakeets that are here in London. The classes who've had me know that I've talked about these parakeets. I'll link a video. Okay, we've got these parakeets living in London, and they've escaped from homes, you know, pet shops, blah, blah, blah. Pets escape all the time, especially the sort of, not cats and dogs, but the sorts of pets that are, you know, more wild animals that you've just locked up in your house rather than domesticated animals. And you know, happy days, they escape. You know, like Budgie gets out, has a lovely time. Little Budgie having some fun, flapping around, enjoying the summer. Yay! And then winter comes, and it's all over. You know, they get killed off. Not so for the parakeets living in London. They're from the foothills of the Himalayas. They can handle the winters here. And what we've got is a population of parakeets here in London, which is completely isolated from the population back in the Himalayas. Okay, there's no opportunity for genes to flow between those two populations. That just can't happen. Okay. Now, are the allele frequencies in this population changing in the same way as they are in this population? Well, no, of course not. They can't be. For a start, any mutations that appear in this population can't get into the other population. Likewise, any mutations in this population aren't going to get into the population over here in the UK. Now, those conditions that these parakeets are having to live in are very different from the ones that these parakeets are having to live in. Okay, the sorts of alleles that are going to be favoured in a bird living in London are not going to be the same as the ones living in northern India. So when you're looking at your normal distribution of any one particular phenotype and thinking about, you know, which alleles are more likely to be passed through into the next generation, because which alleles are conferring reproductive success on their possessors, it's not going to be the same alleles in the population here as the population there. So the allele frequencies change like they always do in the population, but they're not changing in the same way. The alleles that are becoming more frequent and less frequent in the population here are not going to be the same ones that are increasing or decreasing in frequency in the kind of ancestral population that still exists in India. What does this mean? Well, the phenotypes, the expression of those genotypes, and the environment, the two environments are different, are going to change, right? The phenotypes are going to change gradually over the generations. They will change. Now, what that means is the phenotypes that you see in the one population are not the same as the phenotypes you see in the other population as generations pass. We have a concept in biology that we call the species concept. Okay? Two organisms belong to the same species if they can reproduce to produce fertile offspring. Now, in order to be able to produce fertile offspring, you need to have the same number of chromosomes of the same length with the same genes in the same loci. Okay? That's not going to be true for these two populations after enough time has passed. So we would say that they are therefore eventually going to become two different species. What's happened is what we call speciation. Speciation happens when you have reproductively isolated populations that remain reproductively isolated for a number of generations. Okay, quite a large number usually, but there's no fixed number. This is how we end up with new species. Okay, so you'll start with a population, and then at some point, time is moving in this direction. Okay, and these are the descendants of the ones I just drew, and then for some reason, some of them become isolated. These guys might continue on through the years, and these guys continue on through the years, but they're now experiencing different environmental conditions. So these guys are changing in a way that you don't find in the other lot. And it could be that the environment that these guys are going through changes as well. It's very unlikely that it wouldn't. And so they start to diverge. Okay? And after enough time has passed, what you're looking at is two quite distinct species. If we were to follow the ancestry back of this lot, we'd find that actually they were all descended from this lot. Okay? And here we would find ancestors that were ancestors for these guys here and ancestors of these guys here. And at this point in time, they became reproductively isolated. Reproductively isolated. Okay, so at that point in time onwards, they were reproductively isolated. And the organisms that we find here at that moment are what we call the last common ancestor of those two populations. Okay, of that population and that population. All right? So what happened here to reproductively isolate them? Well, there can be lots of different things. The obvious things would be like, us moving a load of animals from one place to another. Well, that'll do it. But, plate tectonics happens, oceans go up and down, sea levels mean that land bridges, the land sort of becomes covered and then uncovered. Britain was attached to France 40,000 years ago, now it's separate. Ireland was attached to Britain for a little while after that, now it's separate. Forests grow and then they recede. Deserts move, these reproductive isolation from geography happens all the time, but it doesn't have to be geographic. There are other ways you can become reproductively isolated too, and we'll look at those in another video. Okay?